Why every ancient Sith hated Darth Vader. Before we even talk about reasons, pause for a second and think about this with me. Darth Vader was a Sith, not a random dark side user, not a wannabe. He was trained by the most powerful Sith Lord in history. He enforced the Empire. He hunted Jedi. He ruled through fear. So then why does the idea even exist that ancient Sith hated him? Not disliked, not doubted, hated, beyond reason. What happened that made a Sith become unacceptable to Sith themselves? Now here is where it gets strange. Ancient Sith did not judge power the way we do. They did not care how feared you were. They did not care how many enemies you killed. They cared about one thing above everything else: constant evolution. To them, power that stops growing is already dying. History proves this again and again. Every ancient Sith order collapsed because they believed conflict inside the order was necessary. Stagnation was decaying. Peace meant weakness. Survival meant worth. Think about ancient Sith empires like those of Marka Ragnos and Naga Sato. These were not small rulers. These were galaxy-level powers thousands of years before Vader. Their empires collapsed not because they were weak, but because they fought each other endlessly. And here is the key detail most people miss. They believed that collapse was acceptable. Why? Because only the strongest would survive and rebuild. That cycle was the point. Destruction was part of growth. So now ask yourself this question. Where does Darth Vader fit in that cycle? He ruled beside Emperor Palpatine from 19 BBY to 4 ABY, nearly 2 full decades, 20 years. And during that entire time, Vader never surpassed his master, not once. No successful coup, no open challenge, no final victory. In ancient Sith terms, that is not patience. That is failure. A Sith generation that does not replace its master is a dead generation. And this is where the hatred begins to make sense. To ancient Sith, Vader was not incomplete because he lacked power. He was incomplete because he stopped the line. Sith history shows clear patterns. Masters expect to die. Apprentices are meant to kill them. That is how the Order survives. A Sith who does not overthrow his master is seen as a wall, not a bridge. Vader became a wall. And walls end movements. Now let us talk about the rule of two, because this is where things get serious. Darth Bane created this rule around 1,000 years before the Empire. He did it because Sith kept wiping themselves out. But the rule was never about loyalty. It was never about obedience. Bane's own holocron states something very clear. The apprentice must kill the master out of ambition, not love, not fear, not hesitation, ambition. So what did Vader do instead? He waited, he obeyed, he enforced Palpatine's rule. For over 20 years, Vader acted as a weapon, not a successor. Yes, he planned. Yes, he tested Luke. But even that plan was not about replacing Palpatine as a Sith ruler. It was about ruling together. Equals. That idea alone would have disgusted ancient Sith. Equals meant weakness. Equals meant compromise. Equals meant hesitation. And then comes the moment everyone brings up. Vader kills Palpatine in 4 ABY. But stop and think. Why did he do it? Was it hunger for power? Was it dominance? Was it Sith ambition? No. It was love for his son. That single fact destroys the rule of two completely, because motive matters more than outcome. Ancient Sith would say this was not succession. This was an emotional collapse. And emotion brings us to the deepest wound. Ancient Sith embraced rage, fear, and hatred, but they rejected attachment. Attachment was poison. It made you hesitate. It made you look back instead of forward. Anakin Skywalker fell to the dark side because of one thing. Fear of losing Padme, not ambition, not hunger for power. Fear. To ancient Sith, that is disgraceful. Fear was to be used, not obeyed. After Padme's death, things only got worse in their eyes. Vader did not turn his pain into conquest. He did not turn it into domination. He buried it. He lived with guilt. Legends and canon both show Vader trapped in regret. Ancient Sith would see this as weakness. Pain was supposed to sharpen you. Instead, it slowed him. His power plateaued. His growth stopped. That is when hatred becomes contempt. And then Luke enters the picture. Think about how insane this looks from an ancient Sith point of view. A Sith Lord with the chance to overthrow his master hesitates because of his son. Luke becomes Vader's final emotional anchor. And in the end, Vader chooses compassion over conquest. He chooses family over supremacy. He dies not as a Sith ruler, but as a redeemed father. So ask yourself now, how could ancient Sith not hate him? He broke the evolutionary chain. He violated the rule of two. He let attachment guide his actions. And worst of all, his choices ended the Sith entirely. To them, Darth Vader was not a tragic hero. He was proof that emotion can destroy an empire faster than any enemy. And here is the most disturbing question. What if the ancient Sith were right about one thing? What if Vader's humanity was not his strength, but the reason their entire order vanished forever? Now let me ask you something uncomfortable. What if the ancient Sith did not just hate Vader for his choices, but for what he needed in order to survive? Because when ancient Sith looked at Darth Vader, they did not see a god of the dark side. They saw a man who could not breathe on his own, a Sith Lord who depended on machines every second of his existence. And for them, that was humiliation. So, if you want stories that make Star Wars feel dangerous, political, and brutally real again, subscribe now, because this channel does not tell fairy tales, it exposes the truth behind the power. Ancient Sith did not chase survival, they chased transcendence. They used the dark side to escape the limits of flesh itself. Sith Lords like Darth Vader mastered essence transfer. Others bound their spirits to armor, temples, or relics. Some used Sith alchemy to twist bodies beyond death. The goal was clear. If you needed something external to stay alive, you were already weak. True power meant the Force alone was enough. Now look at Vader through that lens. After Mustafar, Vader survived only because of a cybernetic life support suit. His breathing, movement, and pain were regulated by machines. His strength depended on electricity and maintenance. Without the suit, he would die in minutes. Ancient Sith would see this not as resilience, but as captivity. A Sith Lord chained to technology instead of ruling through the Force was not evolved. He was reduced. And it gets worse. Legend sources tell us something even more disturbing. Palpatine designed Vader's armor with deliberate weaknesses, not flaws by accident, weaknesses by design. The suit amplified pain. It limited mobility. It allowed Palpatine to control Vader remotely. Think about that. A Sith apprentice whose master can shut him down like a device. Ancient Sith believed masters should fear their apprentices. Palpatine feared Vader so little that he engineered obedience. From the ancient Sith perspective, this crossed a line. Technology was meant to serve the Sith will, not replace it. Using machines as tools was acceptable. Depending on them was disgraceful. To them, Vader was not a master of the dark side. He was a prisoner inside armor, enslavement disguised as power, fearsome on the outside but controlled from within. But physical dependence was only half the insult. The deeper issue was cultural. Ancient Sith were not just fighters. They were scholars, priests, and historians of darkness. Sith trained in academies on Korriban, studying rituals, spellcraft, and forbidden history for decades. They memorized chants. They practiced alchemy. They learned how to preserve knowledge beyond death. Being Sith meant belonging to a lineage. Vader never had that. He never trained in a Sith academy. He never walked the halls of ancient temples as a student. He never studied Sith magic in depth. Palpatine trained him for efficiency, not legacy. Vader was taught how to kill, how to intimidate, how to obey. He was not taught how to preserve the Sith. Ancient Sith would see this as deliberate stripping of legitimacy. Think about this detail. Ancient Sith created holocrons to store knowledge so their influence would survive long after death. They built temples to anchor their power in the galaxy. Vader did none of this. He left no holocron. He founded no academy. He preserved no Sith wisdom. When he died, the Sith died with him. From an ancient perspective, that alone would make him unforgivable. And now comes the final wound, the one that turns hatred into bitterness. Ancient Sith fought the Jedi for thousands of years. Entire empires rose and fell. Billions died. And yet, the Jedi always returned. No matter how powerful the Sith became, they never wiped the Jedi out permanently. Their traditions, rituals, and armies failed to achieve final victory. Then came Palpatine and Vader, and in 19 BBY through Order 66, the Jedi Order collapsed in a single coordinated strike across the galaxy. No Sith academies, no ancient rituals, no massive Sith armies, just deception, politics, and timing. Thousands of Jedi died in one day, something the ancient Sith never accomplished in millennia. This is where resentment becomes personal, because the modern Sith succeeded by abandoning ancient methods. They used democracy against itself. They used trust as a weapon. They ruled through systems, not temples. To ancient Sith, this was heresy. But it worked, and that truth is hard to swallow. Vader became a symbol of victory achieved without tradition. So imagine how ancient Sith would see this outcome. A dependent, emotionally fractured Sith who never claimed the throne, never preserved knowledge, never followed the old ways. And yet, through him, the Jedi were nearly erased. The galaxy feared the Sith more than ever. The ancient Sith were forgotten. Vader became a legend. That is the contradiction they could not forgive. Vader proved that their ideology was not necessary, that centuries of blood and ritual were not required to win. And when an entire belief system is exposed as optional, hatred follows. Because if Vader was enough, then what were they fighting for all those years? And here is the final question I want you to sit with. Did the ancient Sith hate Darth Vader because he was weak? Or did they hate him because he showed that their way was never the only way, and maybe not even the best one? Because sometimes the thing people hate the most is not failure. It is proof that they were wrong.